just that little conversation that we had before we started recording, really showed me what you're about. And the conversation that we had before that, it was very insightful. We started talking about the subconscious mind and all sorts. So let's start from the top. I know that you're a coach and you help successful businessmen get over the hurdle of being anxious and stressed out. What would you advise someone that's going through this period of uncertainty? Apparently we're going into recession. What would you advise the people that are going to be losing their job? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I would say I never advise anyone. I think everyone's got the inner resources to actually help themselves. But what I can say is, from my point of view, when this is the way how I reframed it to myself, because I think it's how we frame it to ourselves.
Okay.
Frame is how we look at a problem, or we look at it as a problem or an opportunity. So at the beginning of this pandemic, I really couldn't understand or emotionally cope with it, and that was because things were taken away from me. And then I decided to take charge of my mind, of my circumstances, rather than let the environment change me. And it is down to how we think, because for us, there are the type of people who are going to thrive during this, the type of people who are going to focus on how do I survive during this. And it is how we actually look and view the situation. And ultimately, it's how we think. Are we going to think reactively, or are we going to think intentionally? So if somebody out there is feeling challenged, initially for us, they're going to feel challenged at the emotional level, because all our decisions are created at the emotional level. But I run this, part of my program is how we think, feel, and behave. But there's a step behind thinking. It's called our blueprint. So I always look at somebody's emotional blueprint. And a person out there whose emotional blueprint is geared towards, think of emotional blueprint as your operating system. And if it's geared towards survival, how am I going to survive? Am I going to be able to go back to work? Am I going to have a job at the end of this? If you ask yourself disempowering questions, you're going to start getting disempowering answers. So this is a time to be agile, emotionally, and the way you think, to be agile. What's the gift in this? What's the opportunity in this? What's great about this problem? And these are, a lot of the tools I've learned are from the masters of coaching, because I've trained with Tony Robbins and Robin Sharma and all that I mentioned to you before. But it's the same thing which I teach. However we think at this time is going to determine what results we have. If somebody out there is going to be reacting, for example, because they're feeling emotionally weak. This is feelings, i.e. they're reacting, they're angry, they're feeling apathetic, they're procrastinating, they're feeling hurt, let down. They're going to focus on that, and they're going to make the wrong decision. So what I would say is, initially, the first step is to write down. Just get a pen and get a piece of paper. Here's an actionable tip. Write down how you're feeling. Write down how you're feeling, how you're thinking. Get it out of your head, because the first thing we do is, as human beings, we try and keep it up there, and we juggle our thoughts. And as we juggle our thoughts, we cannot see what's going on ahead of us, because we're too busy in our emotions and our thoughts. So it becomes a maelstrom. It's almost like in the eye of the storm. So get the information down on the paper and take a look how you're feeling, because you are only reacting to what you think may happen.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like, to put it into an analogy, it's kind of like having tabs in your computer and just leaving it open for days and days, and realizing that your computer's slowing down. The best thing to do is to save the most important the most important websites or documents in a file, and deleting the rest, so you can have a faster computer, and if we're relating it to our mind, a lot more clarity, so you can think, so you can be focused and present on what's actually important. And as you mentioned, absolutely right. Most of the things that are in our head never truly manifest. At least 90% of them And sometimes we overthink ourselves into a certain state when it's unnecessary to do that. And after reading your profile on LinkedIn, it's paramount to be to be in a happy state, in a confident state, so you can tackle what's ahead of you a lot better, rather than being in a disempowered state thinking about what if and what could happen. How does someone refrain from being reactive, especially at the fact that sometimes we inherit it from our parents or our grandparents genetically? How can someone break that pattern?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is to realize, identify, I'm reactive. Because one of the things as human beings, we don't like to be told we're something. So for you to admit that I'm reactive, and then decide I want to be responsive. And there's about a half a second delay between being reactive and being responsive to understand, right, how am I reacting at this time? And to answer that question, again, pen and paper, get out your head. How am I reacting right now? And you can write this down. You can do an exercise in the afternoon and just write down, how have I reacted this morning? At what situations did I react? Negatively, that is. And where was I responsive? The key is to really become consciously aware of the way you think, because thinking for us is a skill. It's a skill set, and no one ever taught us to think.
100%. I never used to think for myself until I read Think and Grow Rich.
All right.
I know that it's besides the point, but it really said, most of the greatest men knew how to think. That's something that, I've never been taught that in school. My father or mother never told me, not even teachers, even your employer. When is it that society will teach us to think for ourselves and step in internally to then filter our thoughts and our actions externally? So it's please dive into the thinking aspects. It's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, I mean, many times over the years when I've delivered the workshops, people have come up to me and said, well, God, this should be taught in school. And then I started to realize, yeah, you're right, we're not actually taught in school how to think.
Yeah.
And I've had headmasters come up to me and teachers who become clients say, well, we're not taught how to think. We're taught, the capital of Australia. We're taught history, the Battle of Hastings. But, fat lot of good they're doing these days. Yeah. But when the SHIT hits the fan, we don't know what to do, because thinking always precedes emotions. Our body is an emotional record of our past experiences. So, for example, somebody out there might have a fear of networking online, let alone being in person, because when you tell them, let's go to a networking event, virtual or in person, they seize up. Immediately the body seizes up. Now, why does that happen? Why does the body start, why does your heart start racing? Why does your stomach start making noises? Because somebody said, let's go to a networking event, because these fears come up. So back to the computer analogy, fears are like pop-ups: fear of not being good enough, fear of standing out, fear of being lonely, fear of being embarrassed, fear of not being good enough. And all these fears come up and you feel them in your stomach. So thinking precedes everything. But that, what we've agreed on, that because we're cast out into the world without the ability to think clearly, we can think, but it's how we ride that bike. It's like learning to drive a car by ourselves, eventually learning, but we never learn to do things properly. And then we crash the car. It is vital that people learn to think. How do you learn to think? The first thing is, when I started, was you've got to start reading books. These days, there's so much information out there. Read books, attend courses, listen to podcasts. There is no better way of getting to know yourself than doing the work on yourself. Books can take you so far. Courses can take you so far. Podcasts can take you so far. But until you work with a professional, you ain't going to solve the problem. Because a really good professional, like a coach, like a therapist, will be able to drill down into your fears, your emotions, and then you'll understand why you think the way you do.
Absolutely, David. Just to add to that, it's bespoke. So when you're reading a book, you are entering into, the expert's mind, of course, and then your thought patterns change. But when you're working closely with a coach or a mentor, then you start to realize that it's tailor made to you, and everyone is different. When you're listening to a podcast, that is, it's casted a wide net to a wider audience, and it's not going to be totally relevant to you. So some parts may apply. You can take out, you can take golden nuggets from it. But when you truly want to make changes, you need to work with someone that's going to help you get over your mental barriers. Because as you mentioned, sometimes we can have traumatic events, going back to our childhood, and a lot of people don't visit it, or they think that it's not in their portion to go over this hurdle because for some reason they can face it. But yet again and again they get the same reaction, and they end up in the same place, neglecting the importance of actually seeing it from a different perspective, having a third perspective outside of you. And that's something that I realized the hard way. And I feel that, there's always, once people see the importance, just like, going to a dentist regularly, once they see the importance of getting your mind checked up, you realize that, okay, my mental health is just as important as my physical health, if not a lot more important. And once people actually open their eyes up to see that, they'll find the key to their true success and happiness.
100%. In my profession, we call it check up from the neck up, which is something that,
neck up. Okay.
something that, of course, your mental health is equal, if not more important than your physical health. Because if you've got a perfect physique, but you're lying there on the bed without any emotional stability, ill, I'd rather be the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're not consciously aware there, then we're gone.
Yeah.
We may as well, we're gone. So I always say that I think truly people are now getting more and more aware, and they're willing to acknowledge that emotional health is not a dirty word. It's actually, when we see a professional, when people come to see me, I tell them it's like the mind gym.
Yeah.
You're coming to the mind gym. You're going to work out your mental muscle. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah.
Your parents weren't experts. They only learned from their parents, who learned from their parents. And this is something that people are only now realizing. There's a great story of the little girl who asked her mum, why do you always cut off the end of the hand joint? And the mum says, that's just the way we do it in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, why do you do it? Just the way we do. I tell you what, I'm going to ask your grandmother. So she rings the grandmother and says, Mum, your granddaughter wants to know, why do we cut the end of the hand joint? This is something we do, isn't it? And the girl's grandmother said, yeah, this is something we do in the family. But the girl said, but why? Why do we do it? So the grandmother said, listen, I'm going to call my mother, the great grandmother. So she hangs up and picks up the phone and says, Mum, yes, dear, why do we cut off the end of the hand joints? It runs down to the family. Why do we do that? She said, it's simple, dear. The container that I put into the oven, it's only that size. But I've had to do it all these years. So we often don't know why we think the way we do for us.
Wow.
It's just something
that was a good story.
Yeah, we pick up on these habits that our mum had, her mum had, her mum had, and it comes down through generations. So beliefs are part of remember that earlier on I mentioned the blueprint, which produces our thinking, feeling, and emotion. Our emotional blueprint contains our beliefs, our belief system. So we don't know often why we do or say the things we do.
That was powerfully said. That's something that society needs to understand. And sometimes, it even stems back to emotional triggers that we're not aware of. Yeah. And not only habits that we witness apparently it's inherited for generations to come. And if you don't break that pattern
Yeah.
intentionally, or if you're
Yeah.
not aware of these patterns, for example, this can stem back to relationship problems, to health problems, to mental health problems. If you actually look back, you'll start to see patterns repeat itself. And that's something that I started to witness in my family. And I was like, okay, something's going on here. When I was growing up, I was seeing it in their family, and slowly but surely it's creeping into my immediate family. Wow, am I just gonna sit here and witness the same thing happen? You know, the breakups of two separate family households, and the internal family arguments, and that sort. It just it repeats itself without even without you having to even witness it, but you just have to look back and see that it is the case for the older generation. And I feel that once we learn how to break that pattern through awareness, as you teach, then that's when we can truly make changes. Let's say, for example, I'm suddenly woke now, and I witness my family going through a habitual pattern that they can't avoid. No matter what you do to speak to them, of course, the end solution is, and 100%, I'm totally there. You go and see a coach and a therapist, 100%. But let's say they're neglecting the fact. What's the least that I can do to help them come out of their predicament?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something that I've faced, and I can clearly tell you that when you're in a family, you are emotionally connected. Therefore, there's a lot of bias there. Even though I'm a coach, it doesn't mean that family will come to me, because they still see me as that 16-year-old back 37 years ago, you know?
I totally resonate with you on that one. Yeah.
There's a very, very fine line between you trying to coach them or advising them, and them thinking that, no, because they see you as still that same person.
Yeah.
And, quite rightly so, because when they're grown up with me, they see you. But however, I've changed physically, mentally, emotionally. Every cell in my body has gone many times over since I was 16. Plus, my mindset has completely changed. My emotional state's completely changed. Now, if I've seen patterns on in my family, of course, and I've mentioned it very lightly. However, that's as far as I take it. Because until someone comes to you, and one of my brothers does come to me actually for advice, and he comes to me for guidance, and when he does that, I'll give him it, because they have to come to you. No one likes to be preached to, especially family members.
Wow, that was you know what? Thank you so much. That was personal and close to my heart, and that was really needed. I really needed to hear that. Thank you. That's something that I habitually got into. I kept preaching to them, assuming that I'm entering into their subconscious mind, when in fact they are rejecting it. And even if it was beneficial, they'll take the exact opposite, because they feel like that they're being talked down to. That's something that I wasn't aware of, and I think that I just have to do my stuff and let success talk for itself, and let them eventually come to me. And with the grace of God, we'll see. Eventually, I would love to speak to someone like you to get into their, to help them mentally in the gym once they're ready. I would love to take services, because you're very credible, and they need they need that sort of support. So at the end of the day, when it comes to to coaches, and I'm sure you're aware of this, they need to like the person as well. So I'm thinking, what can you, how do you associate yourself and differentiate yourself from other coaches? And I think it's an important question.
I had a conversation this a couple of days ago. I was talking to a guy who owns a coffee business, and because we live near the beach, I went for a coffee, and I was speaking to the owner of the coffee business. He's got this camper van. This is fabulous, really trendy, and I love it. We were talking, and socially distanced, of course, but we were talking about people by people.
Absolutely.
And even as I used to be an optician, and I knew I was a locum, so I had to go to different practices, and I always knew they're going to ask me back. And they would only ask you back, not because you could make them money, but because their patients liked you.
Mm-hmm.
So what I never look at differentiating myself with other people. It's just I am me, and it's take me or leave it. No, I'm not everyone's flavor, but no one is.
Mm-hmm.
People buy people. People buy the energy of a person. People buy someone who resonates with them, who gets on the wavelength quickly. I'm all about service, and I'm all about helping people get to the level where they feel good about themselves. Because for large periods of my life, in my teenage years, my 20s, or my 30s, I didn't believe in myself. I didn't actually value myself. So I never thought I was enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I generally like to make people understand they are enough.
I love that.
That's my core message. You are enough.
I love that. So, David, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that, don't like, the positive talks and things like that. I'm all about positivity. Now, for those who don't like the positive talks, you said, feeling good. Why should I feel good?
Well, for a start, I would say I would rather feel good than bad.
Okay.
Sonny Liebermersky, chief psychologist in California, University of Berkeley, California, found out that the three core elements of happiness, I'll just tell you the major one, just to keep this short, was choice. We do have a choice every day. It's not about being positive for us. I mean, people are sadly mistaken if they think it's about being positive. It's not, because we're in lockdown at the moment. That's not positive. It's a move. It's a strategy to prevent a virus spreading. Okay, that's a move. I mean, if somebody looks at a garden and said there aren't any weeds there aren't any weeds in the garden, but there are, and they think they're being positive, they're not being positive. They're BSing themselves. Positive is taking action. It's taking action. So even though my environment is not perfect, I can't go to the cinema, the coffee shops. For me, it's taking action and taking responsibility that I'm in control of my life, not it is in control of me. But that is my version of positive. Positive is not me saying, I am happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy, I'm wealthy. Because your mind won't accept that. So there's a lot of people out there thinking, oh, it's positive. It's not about being positive. It's actually being consciously aware that you are far more than you think you are. What are we, 30 to 50 trillion cells vibrating a certain energy? We are energy. No one can dispute that. We are energy. Take a piece of human tissue, look down it, we're cells. Look down further, atoms, neutrons, protons, electrons. Look further down in a microscope, science has found out we are waves of energy. We are energy. So when you're around someone who's really, you say positive, actually, they like themselves. They like their life. They exude happiness. You're around someone who's very negative, blames, complains, judges everyone. You feel their energy too. So actually, it's not about being positive. It's actually being aware that we're actually more than we think we are. And we've got more than we think we do. Far more. So that's how I would explain to someone. It's not about being positive.
I love that. Thank you so much. And let's conclude it here because I'm still consciously aware that you have that you have a session at 11, and
Thank you.
of course you want to rejuvenate. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, my friend. You take care.